for the Chatham Pet Food Pantry. The club is trying to help offset the costs some people face while trying to feed their pets during the winter season. This past Monday, the Handbell Choir gave a holiday concert at the Woodlands Assisted Living in Brewster. On Tuesday, members of the 10th through 12th grade band went over to the middle school to mentor 5th grade band students. The 5th grade students do not have section-specific pull-out lessons built into their schedules, so the high schoolers are trying to fill that gap by helping them one-on-one several times throughout the year. This is the third year of the program, and both the high schoolers and the middle schoolers love to participate in it. We had several 8th and 9th grade music students audition for the Junior Southeastern Massachusetts Music Festival. 6 vocalists were accepted to the treble choir, and 3 instrumentalists were accepted to the band. Throughout the month, the Young Women's Club has been collecting food and other items to donate to the Family Pantry of Cape Cod. The peer leaders are teaming up with Harwich Children's Fund and the Chatham Children's Fund to collect socks, wrapping paper, toys, and gift certificates for children and families in need this holiday season. Creative writing classes and Sanskrit, the Creative Writing Club, created gingerbread houses made from cardboard milk cartons. They then used these to inspire some holiday-themed creative writing. The gingerbread houses can be seen on display outside the library. Winter sports have begun with boys and girls basketball, boys and girls ice hockey, and cheerleading practicing and squaring off in their first competitions. Boys basketball has already had their first win against Martha's Vineyard, 79-69. Rehearsals for the spring musical Newsies have also begun. The show is very dance-oriented, so the entire cast has been working hard at learning how to tap dance. In about 15 minutes, our winter concert will be taking place in the auditorium, showcasing performances by the select choir, chorus, bands, and ladies a cappella. And coming up next week, we have several fun activities planned before we break for the holidays. Each day of the week has a different theme for the students to dress up as, such as Pajama Day, Ugly Sweater Day, Festive Outfit Day, and Whiteout Day. There are also activities during and after the school day. On Monday night, Elf is being shown in the auditorium and is open to all families. On Tuesday, an ugly sweater competition will take place during lunch. There will also be a free gift-making workshop one day after school and holiday karaoke at lunch. A new addition to our Holiday Spirit Week this year is the class tree competition, which you probably saw outside as you were walking in. Each class and a few clubs have been given a Christmas tree to decorate. At the end of the week, the trees will be judged based on teamwork, creativity, and school spirit. Thank you to the Spirit Club for again organizing a fun-filled Spirit Week for our students.
Okay. Well, thank you, Caroline, and break a leg.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to the public comment section. Is there anyone that would like to speak? And could you state your name too, please?
My name is Diane Nash. I'm from Chatham, and I am here in case you guys haven't heard enough about the middle school and how great they are. I'm going to tell you a little bit more. I'm a parent of 6th graders at the middle school, and I also happen to be on the parent advisory committee. So this has been my first year on that committee, so it's given me a chance to actually get a little bit of insight what they're doing on that committee, or at the school actually, and it's a lot of great stuff. You already know how great they all are, but I just wanted to just talk about Mr. Wilson and Adam O'Shea, who are amazing. Up until this year, I didn't realize just how much these middle school teachers are doing. 5th grade was a huge transition from the elementary school, and this year's even a bigger step up, and I just wanted to thank the teachers. They're always available to the girls, and they've been great. And what I realized on this the advisory committee is Mr. Wilson never sleeps. He is always writing grants, and he's doing all sorts of great stuff. Our kids have had a great opportunity to do some really great field trips, and we have that writers retreat that my girls got to go to last year, which was great. So just, again, you guys already know all of this stuff, but I'm telling you again, and I just wanted to mention one other thing. I didn't know if you guys were aware that Ms. Cortese, is that how you say her name? At the meeting, our last meeting, was telling us about a new, it's probably not that new, but just the way that they're implementing an English program there. So that was really great to hear. So I just wanted to say thank you and make sure you guys all know. That's it.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, I'll close the public comment section then and move to recognitions.
We have several tonight. First, from St. Peter's Lutheran Church's Psalm Group and the Esther Circle have donated holiday gift bags for several homeless students at Chatham Elementary. They've also made a generous contribution of $1,080 and donated holiday gift bags to homeless students at Harwich Elementary. At Chatham Elementary, we also had an anonymous donor who gave $300 for grade 4 students to attend the movie American Tail at the Orpheum Theater. The movie coordinates with 2 of this grade's levels pathway units on how to study a person and how to study a time in history. The request for this donation came after this donor challenged the teaching teams to come up with a way to integrate this community partner into our units of study. Dr. Michael Thompson agreed to donate his time to both the staff during the day and the community during a parent university at Chatham Elementary School. He'll be working with the Chatham Elementary staff on Monday, January 28th to support their Empower Hour learning efforts as it relates to, particularly to the education of boys. Then in the evening, he is planning to present on raising resilient children. He's foregoing his fee for both events, and all proceeds raised by the PTO for the evening event are to be forwarded to the PTO for the playground fund. And I can't speak highly enough about Michael Thompson. I had him work in my former district, and he wrote a book, Raising Cain, that the last segment of that movie focused on a set of kids that were near and dear to me back in the day. So he has a lot of great insights on things that help, particularly when it comes to the education and raising of young men. Thanks also to the Angel Fund and to Cape Kids Meals for their continued support by providing food, gifts, and other services to various students and families at Chatham Elementary. Chatham Elementary Schools also received 4 letters of support for their playground project from Chief Paulina, Lindsay Burwith, Judith Giorgio, and Dan Tobin. Thanks to David Mason for his donation of a 1976, he was from the class of 1976 Chatham High School, and he donated his Visible Man science fair project that was quite the throwback as I was looking at this little model that came in. Thanks to the Pilgrim Masonic Lodge in Harwich, who donated 18 winter coats to students in need, and also 3 color printers and $150 towards lunch accounts at Harwich Elementary. Chatham Summer resident Mike Quinn for his donation of a lacrosse goal to the athletic department, to the Art of Charity for their generous grant in the amount of $1,000 to help bring Roby Hager, a guest drama coach, to the high school for the production of Newsies. BA Event Promotions for their $500 donation to the Global Studies Program to help fund the Tanzania trip. Harwich Elementary School would also like to recognize the town of Harwich for providing the machinery and manpower to remove the slide, jungle gym, and fire pole at the Harwich Elementary playground. These playground elements were identified as immediate safety concerns in the safety audit completed by New England Playground Inspections, and we're grateful for the collaborative effort with the town and school district to address these safety concerns right away. And lastly, at Harwich Elementary School, Nancy Capon, an English learner teacher, and Joe Zabelski, a 4th grade teacher, were chosen by the DSE as Office of Language Acquisition as one of 4 exemplars for supporting English language learners and with and without disabilities. Through this long process, this co-teaching team was interviewed and observed before they were chosen for this DESE project, and Joe and Nancy are highlighted in videos posted on the DESE website as resources for all schools.
Great, thank you. And moving on to reports and discussions, we'll have the nurse report.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cheryl Defoe, and I'm the high school nurse here at the high school, and I'm also the nurse leader for the Monomoy Regional School District. Thank you for the opportunity to let me present the nurses' report to you tonight, and I will try to keep it brief. I'm sure y'all have to go home and finish your Christmas cards, so initially, I'm here just to do a brief overview. Primarily, most of the data that I'm presenting is from last year, from the 2017-18 school year, and most of you, I think, were here last year for the report, so I have a few numbers I can refer back to, but just to start out, the role of the school nurse is to advance the well-being, academic success, and lifelong achievement for our district students, to provide comprehensive health services to the children of our school district as part of a coordinated health program, and to be a critical link between the health and educational communities. One of the biggest things for children is that their health is directly related to their ability to learn. In the slide that's presented, Mary Beth Maloney, that's our Chatham Elementary School nurse, she is hosting a student from Regis College who is working on her BSN. She's an RN with a BSN candidate. So Mary Beth has graciously offered to be her preceptor for 60 hours. How do we help children learn? We provide direct care to our students. That's anything from administering medications during the school day, routine first aid. We provide leadership within the school district. We provide screening and referral for health conditions, promote a healthy school environment, serve in a leadership role for health policies and programs, and we do act as a liaison for parents, school personnel, family, healthcare professionals, and work with our community. So what does it look like? Each student that has a chronic or acute medical condition, the nurses write an individual health care plan at the beginning of each school year, or as a new diagnosis presents itself. That plan is coordinated with the student, depending on the student's age, with the parent, and with the healthcare provider. We're also developing emergency action plans for students with life-threatening allergies and seizure disorders. We are part of the 504 process, so students that need accommodations in school, the nurses are responsible for writing 504 plans for students with medical disabilities, or assisting our guidance team and our school psychologist with the accommodations that should be in place. All of the nurses serve on our student support team, so we work very closely with our guidance counselors, school psychologists, administrative staff, just trying to identify students that are at risk. So we meet weekly as a scheduled time slot, but especially at the high school, we're meeting sometimes 5-6 times a day, depending on what the students' needs are. Continually, we are in communication with parents, guardians, and healthcare professionals. If you call the high school and you can't get through, you can always hit extension 3 and you'll get the school nurse. So we are always available to our parents and to the community. Absentee management is a huge part of the school nurse role. We're really looking closely at that this year as well. We work very closely with our guidance department, again, school psychologists, the whole student support team. Healthy children kids need to be in school to learn. So even if they have chronic medical conditions that are excused, our emphasis is getting them to school and trying to make some accommodations so that they're able to access the curriculum. And health education, that's just something we do in every visit when we're with a student. Our staffing for the district in the health services department changed, so I'm just going to kind of just reflect back to last year as well. We had one full-time health assistant that floated through the district last year with a .4 health assistant that worked at Harwich Elementary to help assist with the volume in that building. Those two positions have been shifted to teaching assistants or instructional assistants, and we now have a full-time RN, Carol Fiacco, who is here just in case I need some moral support. So Carol floats now. She's our float and resource nurse, so she is able to, she's scheduled at certain schools on certain days. But she's available for covering for 504 meetings, for field trips as needed, just to provide extra support and help in the busy nurses' offices. We have a .5 registered nurse who also provides coverage. Currently, she's scheduled at the high school. That position is to support the nurse leader position. The nurse leader position here in the district is a stipend position. We currently have a grant through the Department of Public Health. So Sarah Sears is our new part-time nurse, so she's working with me to, so that I can work on nurse leader responsibilities. She's available to take care of students. As far as the nurse leader position, again, it's a stipend position, and it's essentially, it's an important role here in the district. Some of the school districts on the Cape have a full-time nurse leader position. What the position in our district helps with is, we definitely still have a lot of work to do with policies and procedures. I'm able to go off Cape and meet quarterly with other nurses statewide, and then we also meet regionally and just share best practices, nursing protocols, and especially meeting with other Cape nurses. It's really important to identify the needs of our unique community here. Student encounters for 2017 and 18. Our average return to class rate district-wide in the nurse's office is 93%. That 93% was the same the year prior, so we're holding ground. The district nurses saw 31,892 students in 17-18. When I reported out last year, we were at 26,073 for the 16-17 school year, so we're up almost 6,000 visits for the past year. So, Cape Cod Melody Tent. I've just tried to put this in perspective. So what does 31,892 student encounters look like? So I don't know if any of you have been to the Cape Cod Melody Tent, but the Monomoy Regional School District nurses cared for, enough students to fill the Cape Cod Melody Tent 14 times last year. So 2,300, they can seat 2,300 people. So there's, busy volume we've had. And then I know you love these bar graphs. So total health office student encounters. So as I said, on the far left, 31,892 total visits for the 2017-18 school year. 9,781 were due to illness. 12,532 due to medication administration and treatments. 4,300 approximately for injury. 1,191 for behavioral health and other category. It's, the way we chart, sometimes if it's, just a student coming in for a miscellaneous visit, changing clothes, maybe needs bathroom assistance. Our behavioral health falls under that umbrella, and I will speak a little bit more about behavioral health further in the presentation, but, I think as nurses, we could do a better job breaking that down and documenting to try to capture that data. They say about 20% of school-age children have some type of emotional, social emotional need right now, and we're definitely seeing that in the nurse's office. Total, I know you love this slide, total student enrollment and encounters by school. So Harwich Elementary School had last year 11,543 student visits. Chatham Elementary had 4,757. The middle school, 458 students with the 7,166 encounters. And the high school, we were at 628 student enrollment with 8,426 encounters. Not every office visit is the same. Not every student encounter is the same. The elementary schools definitely have a higher volume of visits. They have a lot of kids coming in for very complex medical issues, but they also have a lot of foot traffic for cuts and scrapes and bumps and bruises and a little bit of TLC. The middle school currently has the highest need for, daily medication administration and treatments. And, I would say at the high school, we're looking at a lot of behavioral health. Concussions is a real challenge right now. I think we have about 8 students this year to date that have been diagnosed with concussions. And also at the high school, it's like a full-time case management role, essentially. A lot of documentation, charting, attendance follow-up, and again, working, I think, very closely with our guidance team, school psychologist, and administration, just to try to help kids get to school and stay in school. Just a quick glimpse at what we looked at last year for our numbers. We do report our data to the state. Our students with special health care needs at Monomoy, the numbers, to the right, we had 102 asthmatics, life-threatening allergies, 41 students. We had 14 students with diabetes, 14 diagnosed seizure disorders, 27 migraines. That's a real growing concern right now. That's definitely impacting our attendance, the migraine disorders. Concussions, last year we had 8 total, and we're already at 8 this year. Cardiac conditions, autoimmune disorders, blood disorders. Between those disorders that you're looking at, conditions, between, putting an individual health care plan in place for these students and communicating each of these diagnoses with the teachers, we're constantly coordinating care. Some of the nursing assessments and interventions we do in all of the nurses' office: blood glucose tests, carbohydrate and insulin pump calculations. Our students with diabetes, with technology today, we have 7 diabetics in one building. They could all have a different piece of equipment. So nurses constantly have to stay educated, and now we have to be tech savvy. We have our some students wear continuous glucose monitors so we can read their blood glucose while they're in class. We also obviously take blood pressure measurements. That's not only for students, oftentimes it's for staff. Respiratory assessments, wound assessments, injury and first aid. We are there for not only for staff, we are there for visitors in the building, family members we've called 911 for. And behavioral mental health, like I said, that is one of a major concern. And so for behavioral health, we call it somatic complaints. In the nurse's office, many of the physical symptoms children express and seek out the nurse for are caused by or exacerbated by psychological and emotional factors. Some of the diagnoses that we, keep track of and report to the state. Many of our students have ADHD. Anxiety is a growing concern. That comes in with a lot of school avoidance, depression, eating disorders, autism. We see a lot of students with PTSD and trauma, substance use and abuse disorders. Vaping is a really major concern right now as well. So we are working at addressing that at the high school, and I'm sure the middle school, and I do think that education needs to start at an earlier age. I think we need to start, looking at kids in 4th and 5th grade and trying to educate them in early intervention and prevention. And then just other behavioral, emotional concerns. We're just seeing, like I said, a lot of high anxiety and a lot of avoidance. As far as what else nurses do, we have to follow our state guidelines and laws, and we have it's in your report. By grade, we have to do certain screenings on children, so vision, hearing, and body mass index. In the middle school, we do the postural screening, it's screening for scoliosis, and what was new last year was SBIRT, which stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. Through the state law says that you students 1 grade level in middle school and 1 grade level in high school need to be screened. So here at Monomoy, we chose to screen grades 7 and 9. We screened 245 kids last year. We all had to be trained. The screeners had to be trained through the Department of Public Health. So they were screened by nurses, by our social workers and school psychologists. And, you know, we didn't have anyone screen in, so that's a really good thing. It was a really great way. You know, I think a lot of us were a little nervous about initially doing these screens on the kids, but it was really a great way for us to, you know, establish a relationship with a student that maybe we would have never encountered, and just to be able to talk about brain development and addiction with these kids. So I think the kids were honest and open to it. Okay, so this picture, this is at one of our schools, and this is when you walk into the nurse's office. This is her, you know, her table, and these supplies are set up for the daily care of her students with diabetes. So each student has their own basket with their equipment and, you know, with their insulin and, you know, fast-acting carbohydrates. And essentially for this particular school, let's say a typical student with diabetes has to come in daily. They come in to check their blood glucose prior to going to physical education. They'll come in and check a blood glucose prior to, you know, to having a snack. They have to check their blood glucose prior to going to lunch. They have to check a blood glucose prior to going home. And then anytime they feel like they might be high or low. And when I say check a blood glucose, they have a glucometer, and they have to, you know, prick their finger, and the number comes up on a screen. And every time a student comes in to, you know, to check their blood glucose, or if they don't feel well due to the diabetes, it requires a nursing assessment. In this particular school, times that by 7, because she has 7 diabetics in the building. So her lunch hour, it's, you know, it's every day, 5 days a week. And on top of that, you know, the child falls down in the gym, a teacher slips and hits her head, you know, someone vomits in the hallway. So, you know, there's a lot to juggle, and I applaud this nurse for taking care of all of this and, you know, running the office as smoothly as she does. And a day at the beach. I wish we were there now. So here's a field trip view. Carol Fiacco, our float nurse, goes on many of the field trips when a nurse is needed. So they went to the National Seashore on the left. The students had a great time. And then on the right, you know, I just put what Carol's view of the field trip was, because she was there with her calculator and her clipboard and had to, you know, go over the insulin calculations and administer the insulin there on a concrete wall, I guess, while she was at the National Seashore. At the middle school this year, they've had, I think, 19 field trips to date, and I think 9 or 10 of them have required a registered nurse to go. So, you know, it's a lot of advanced planning. We do ask that teachers submit at least 2 weeks in advance field trip plans in case we do have to send a nurse. And then for trips like this, every time we send a nurse, you know, it's packing the bag, packing the diabetic supplies, notifying the parents, getting parental permission to let them know that, you know, the student's going on a field trip. And then, of course, it could be a little bit challenging to manage, you know, a high blood sugar, a low blood sugar, or first aid sometimes if you're, you know, very limited as to where you are. And the emergency preparedness, this is a picture of us nurses last year. We coordinated a Stop the Bleed training here at the high school. The nurse on the right, she accompanied us from Cape Cod Tech, and Harwich EMS did the training. So Stop the Bleed, it's essentially, it's a program that, you know, it helps to teach bystanders how to prepare or how to care for somebody if there was like a major trauma. So yes, we're all nurses, we know how to pack wounds and stop bleeding, but this is for like major trauma if, you know, there was some type of a major event in the school. So now we are able to train staff here. So we're working on putting a protocol in place so that we can just get, you know, not to make people have to respond, but I think in general, you know, it's helpful for the general public just to understand. Unfortunately, this is the day that we live in, that we, you know, you could come across a car accident, and there's real simple ways that you can save a life. So all of us nurses also serve on the building-based crisis teams, as well as a few of us are on the district crisis committee, and I think we all work individually with our building principals and with our support staff, just trying to survey our buildings, making sure they're safe, being part of drills. So I think that's about it. You'll have to get back to your cards, I know. So I just want to say thank you very much to Dr. Carpenter, Melissa McGuire, our Director of Student Services, who was a great support for our nursing staff, and all of our building principals. And again, thank you, school committee, for your time. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Donna. Cheryl.
Yes.
Great coverage. It's kind of like Fontaine Center Annex.
It is, yes.
I'm starting to feel queasy right now.
Yeah, well, that's why I brought Carol, in case I fell, too.
So certainly free time isn't one of your department elements as you sit around watching the same. The thought struck me, 32,000 visits. Maybe you should just have the screening, just wait on every kid coming in and screen them, no matter how they feel.
As they walk in the door.
I think I asked this, and this is tremendous data. It's kind of, it catches you up on what life in a school is when youngsters come in. Is there any, just take the Cape, is there any common school data collection process that, but 4 or 5 of these pages could be compared to, say, DY or NOS, so at least you guys could feel that we're all running fast on the treadmill, or what is it with our lovely 2 towns, or we're about the mean average.
We all collect data, so Monomoy switched from one electronic medical record last year. It was in November. I guess I think I said that in the report, but that was a big challenge last year, changing over our health database. So we now are using the same electronic medical record that most of our surrounding Cape schools use. We don't really compare our numbers per se to one another, but like I said, being the nurse leader, I do get together with our local nurse leaders at these state meetings, at our regional meetings, and then we now have, broken it down to the Cape Nurses meeting. So I think we're seeing the same types of, I think the mental health issues are huge. I think like the vaping in school is huge. I mean, when people hear that we have 7 diabetics in one building, that is huge. There's no other building on the Cape that has that amount of diabetic students. Those students will move on to different schools, and again, that's why the needs in the building, it's hard to, you can't always say, I mean, you could have a building with 250 kids and have higher acuity, higher needs than you do at, one of our larger schools. Harwich Elementary is the largest school, I believe, elementary school on Cape Cod. We could look at that data, but I honestly, I don't think we're really off. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I just feel like I think I think on the Cape we're dealing with a lot of unique issues, whether it's social, emotional, economic, cultural. So I do think we just try to share best practices that way.
Yep. My last comment, obviously, the staff, when one of you folks falls down ill, the floater or a health aide covers that day in that school.
Well,
so there is some coverage no matter.
Yeah, so what happened, years past is we had a health assistant who was, she was great. She knew all the children in most of the buildings because she'd worked here for many years. So she's now working at our middle school as an instructional assistant. But what happens is, so there's a full-time nurse in every building. And then having Carol now as our float nurse, if I have to, like on Thursdays, it's at the high school, it's our SST day, our student support team, so she covers the high school on Thursdays so that she's the nurse in the office while I'm, at a student support meeting. She can cover if someone has a scheduled 504 meeting, because what was happening is people were coming into the office and they'd see our health assistant, and, whether it was a student that came in and said, I think I just ate peanuts and I have a life-threatening allergy, well, we can train her to administer the EpiPen for a student that was identified as having a life-threatening allergy. If the student didn't have the identified life-threatening allergy, she couldn't make that nursing assessment. So, it was almost like a liability to the district because really, there's only certain things that RNs can do, and they're working under our license. And it's just the complexity and the need of these children in our schools today. We just felt like having that full-time person that was an RN, that could offer the support was just adding to the safety for our students.
Thank you again. If I feel ill on the road, I'll swing in here.
Okay.
You can add me to the list.
Okay, we will. We'll keep data on that too. We'll report that out next year.
Sharon?
I wanted to thank you because the report was very comprehensive. It gave us a good idea of, I worked in a school up till 7 or 10 years ago, and things have even expanded since that time for many areas, but the school nurse I wasn't up on so much. The pictures of the field trip and what the nurse sees and all of these things are really insightful. Easy for us to see what you're talking about from their perspective, but also I appreciated not only the litany of all the different things, but when you came to like the number of concussions you had last year and saying, okay, this year we've already had that many, and vaping's a big issue. So, that's one of the things that I'll appreciate, look forward to next year too, is to see what's different year to year now that we have some good idea of what all's going on. I like the idea of having the RN there who can do things if you're not there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just had a couple of quick clarification. Do you have any conjecture as to why there might be 5,800 more visits to the nurse?
Well, I can't say. I can say that I mentioned that we changed our documenting, our database, so I don't know if it's numbers. When I reported last year, I was using data from the previous year, which wasn't, I wasn't responsible for collecting the data because we had a different nurse leader. But I think with the new system that we have, it's an easier system to use, and I think the nurses, honestly, there are, if you look at each school, because I can kind of see what's going on in each building, it just varies what we're documenting. When kids just run, sometimes at the high school I'll document a kid coming in to use the bathroom as an other, only because I know a teacher's going to call and say, did so-and-so really spend a half hour in your office, but I think, I think mental health was a big part of it. I just think that the kids have a lot of needs, and, they're in class and they are struggling and they need movement breaks. So some of it isn't, it's not that it's all, gore and, tourniquets, but kids, they trust us too, and we do work closely with guidance, but when a kid is struggling, they can walk through the door and say, I have a stomach ache.
Yeah, it
and
just
do
sounds
they really?
like a lot.
But a lot of it is,
of
breaking
numbers
that
increased.
down. Yeah, we
That
spend a
concerns
lot
me.
of our day like saying, okay, you've been in, and so we can track, like you've been in 4 times, and what class are you coming from? And, so let's get down to the matter. Is it math, or is it, what's going on at home? So, it's just not what it was, when I even started, in school nursing. It's
Okay,
evolving.
just one other question. Under the injury, 4,300, could you give me some examples of injury?
Gym class, a student rolls their ankle, they're on the playground, they, fall off.
4,300?
Yeah, when we can, we try to track if it's a school injury, like that's today injury, not the injury that came in, like, oh, I hurt myself 3 days ago, but you figure with all of those encounters, I actually thought that number was a little bit low compared to, I would have thought it would have been higher, but.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Anyone? Oh,
I
Jackie?
just had a question. I remember that we actually spoke about it last year, but the number of encounters by school
Yes.
for Harwich Elementary, and I remember specifically discussing the high number at Harwich Elementary. Do you have, it's okay if you don't, do you have the number from last year compared to this year?
I don't have, I should have had it written
That's okay.
down, but I
I
didn't
just-
get it. Do you remember? Carol was the nurse there last year.
I just remembered,
but-
it was like a really high number. We were like, oh my
I think we're a
goodness.
little bit higher. I think we were about 10-something last year, so I think we went up a little
We
bit.
went up a little bit, so
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
necessarily really changed.
Yeah, I mean, this week I'm looking, and Holly is our new nurse over there. She's seeing 60 students a day. She's documenting right about now. So, she's busy.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Joe?
Just, thank you. I think the number of questions you're hearing from us is no indication of any inadequacy in the report, but rather the value we understand of the role that nurses play. I have one question. There's one thing I didn't understand, and if you could say just a few sentences about it for clarity, I would appreciate it. There was a slide on supporting student success, and one item was absenteeism management. I always thought of that as the role of the office. The role of the nurses in absenteeism management, could you just say a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different areas. I think like at Chatham Elementary, and probably Harwich Elementary, I believe that they're making, they're taking some of the attendance calls, so they're tracking. And I think Chatham being a little bit smaller, the nurse is able to, probably follow up on most of those phone calls daily. But essentially, what I really I'm trying to speak to, I think, is, the kids that are out, say to date, they've been out 10, 15 times, that requires us to follow up with the parents. It requires us to meet with the team, oftentimes working with Melissa, but to get a consent, try to get a consent to speak to the student's physician, to try to really determine. So a lot of the things that we're seeing today, like migraine headaches, it's a big concern right now. It's subjective, a lot of it, and not to say that it's not a true ailment, but a lot of these conditions are turning. At times, we're not sure if it's quite school avoidance. The longer you stay out of school, you fall behind, the harder it is to get caught up. And so I think we're just really trying to look at managing it. We're the medical professionals in the building, so if there's a student that has a medical diagnosis and we're starting to look at these numbers growing, it's time for the nurses to intervene and just offer support, because oftentimes, the provider, especially if it's a specialist, they may not be aware that the student is out 5 or 6 times in a month due to a migraine or due to even if it's diabetes, if they are aware of that, if the parent's not reporting it, that's time to get that kid back into the doctor's office and, have a conversation and maybe a med adjustment, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Happy holidays, everyone.
Addressing high school accountability. Bill?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here this evening. I haven't presented in a while, so I'll do my best to make this as speedy as possible. So tonight we're going to talk about the new accountability data that was out for the high school this year and some action steps, short-term and long-term, on how we assess things and how we plan to attack our weaknesses and continue to grow our strengths. And so the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is the quote from Secretary of Education James Pazer. This is still a new assessment based on recently revised curriculum frameworks, and as such, it will take time for the results to stabilize into a reliable baseline against which real improvements can be measured. So I think it's brand new. I like it much better than the old accountability system, but it is, as he says, they still haven't figured it out yet in subsequent conferences and research that I've been involved with. It's going to take a couple of years for them to kind of iron this thing out. So when I present this, what you'll find is that we not only took this data, but we compared it, because any kind of reliability that you're going to get, or trend, typically takes a minimum of 3 years. So we've looked back at 3 to 5 years worth of data to come up with some of our results here. So I'm going to try to click on. So this would be an example of what the state will send us, and I know it's kind of small. I don't know if you have in your packets or not, but it is a link that was sent out, and I'll just try to point out to some, because I can't even read it from here. And I'll see if my new, whoops, bear with me. Okay. That laser's not working here. All right, so I think the biggest takeaway here, the left column is our 8th grade, and still kind of divided in half. The left 2 columns are 8th grade, and the right 2 columns are our upperclassmen 9 through 12. And they rate you on a 0 to 4. So basically, what the nuance in here is, a lot of what they're doing is comparing one class versus the previous class in your MCAS scores. If you show any kind of decline or status quo, you get 0 points. If you improve a little bit, you get 1 or 2 points. And the state has set targets. We don't know how they do that or what mechanism they choose. They still haven't released that even for this year, but they set targets, so how much you should increase. If you meet those targets, you get 4s. And then they cumulatively add those together. So what I like about this, it used to be just about the achievement and a little bit about the growth. What they've expanded this on here is the first block on the left in the blue up top. If you're having trouble reading it like me, is achievement. The green column underneath, or the green row, is growth, which is very important. The next color, the beige or orange color there, is high school completion, which is graduation rates. The purple column or row underneath that is progress towards English language proficiency. You'll see we have 0 there because we don't have the number of students maintaining for the borderline level, which they start counting those, but they'll appear in other scores that I'll talk about. And then the gray on the bottom is additional indicators, which is chronic absenteeism, so they'll talk about absenteeism, and advanced coursework like AP scores, any other advanced courses. So this is a more comprehensive look at what the school is doing, so that's a real strength of this new assessment. And you're kind of compared against yourself so each year. So after a few years, you'll have a little more of a pattern versus one grade versus another, because we all know that one class is very different than another. But some takeaways are certainly clear from this data. And the 8th grade did extremely strong. It's a strong class in general, but there's 4s across the board on each side for their math scores and their English scores for achievement. As far as growth, they got 2s out of 4. So it's good but not great. Could be better there, so we have room for growth there. And on the right column for our 9th grade, in 9th through 12, or 10th grade in this case for MCAS typically, we have 1 through 4, 1 through 4 in English, 1 through 4, 1 out of 4 in math, and then 0 out of 4 in science. So we didn't show any growth or minimal growth in our achievement scores. And then on the right far column, and something also new that's I like about the new accountability assessment, they really break out your lowest performing students, and they identified 25 students, I believe, through some sort of a formula, and then they let you know at some point who those students are. So we've taken on the challenge that we want all students to grow and rise. So if you take on that, especially our students that need it the most. So I think those numbers were 0s there. So certainly that's our focus. Our lowest performing 25 students, which will be the case this year, but there was no growth in that category. So certainly a weakness, an area for improvement. The 9 through 12 attendance, chronic attendance, was 3 out of 4, and 4 for 4 in the lowest performing students in 8th grade. And the interesting thing, just for an example, in the left column for 8th grade, it was 0 for 4. We decreased from the year before by 0.6%, less than a percent, which is about 1 student, and we got 0 points. So although it looks alarming up there, 0 for 4, it needs to be explained to you that it was 1 student difference in our attendance. So although it's a focus this year, I think we've been doing really good with keeping an eye on our attendance at the high school. And also the graduation rates up there were 4 for 4s. So we're doing, that's been our focus in the last few years. As you know, we've increased our graduation rates, and even on the new model, based on our targeted outcomes, we've achieved those as well. So it's a strength of ours. Another interesting tidbit that I want to point out, if you see advanced coursework, we got 0 for 4. And 4 short years, we've doubled the amount of kids that take AP courses. But compared last year to this year, it was 2%. I think it represents a little over 2 students difference between one year and another. So we got 0 because it didn't increase, and not only did it didn't increase by their target. So just some digging in the weeds a little bit, so it's not the end of the world. And something also that's interesting for us that we focus on is that we have all our students take the exam in AP, and a lot of schools don't. So we're very proud of that because we want them to do that. We also push our students to want to take that. We don't have a lot of roadblocks in students that take APs, and some schools, what we found is that to score well on this, they'll have a group of kids and they may weed out certain kids not to take the test, and then only take the test of the kids that are going to do well. We have all our kids take the test in our numbers, and I think Dr. Carpenter shared this with you over the summer or in early September. Our numbers have really increased dramatically. So this won't tell you that, but I will, that our AP scores, and I'm interested that they don't count that here, have increased dramatically. We put a lot of work into that, so we're very proud of that. So there's some strengths and weaknesses mixed into this. Again, but we'll be focusing on all these areas in the action plan, as you'll see. Now I gotta get out here. So there are the full bullets. I kind of went over these, but this is the new accountability system, what they're looking at. Those 4 areas: achievement, growth, high school completion, which is graduation and dropout rate, and additional indicators, which are absenteeism and advanced coursework. So we've broken down some short-term goals that we're already working on this year, and then we've got some longer-term goals to improve. And the first thing we talk about at the school is the mindset shift, and that's that, you know, we always talk about being the best school in the state, and that's our goal, and you know, our numbers aren't showing that right now. So it starts with me to be accountable for that and to say that, you know, we need to grow and do better. And then one of our first meetings with the staff was sharing some of this data with them and saying, you know, we can do a lot better than this. And we need to work harder and do things smarter. And a lot of this is systemic that I'll share with you right now, that we, after 5 years, have been able to really dig down and to look at some of our systems to find some flaws that we can do better, that I know will reap benefits. And so the first bullet there is focused professional collaboration. So in the past, our faculty meetings, our professional learning community meetings, and our department head meetings were very separate, and they had information agendas and very well organized, but they weren't all connected and cohesive and collaborative. They didn't all connect around one theme or one goal. And some of those meetings, like in a lot of schools, are informational. So you may come to a faculty meeting and have some information to share with staff. We've moved away from that this year, and it's something that's working extremely well for us, in which all meetings have a common goal and product. When the meeting's over, what's the objective? Just like a class. What's the objective of this meeting? What's our goal? What's the outcome, and what product are we going to have to show that we've done the work? And we found that very positive and beneficial. For example, let me just back up. And part 2 of that is getting the whole staff involved in this. Because the old school mindset would be, okay, English teachers are responsible for the ELA MCAS score. Science teachers are here in this. And so what about the teachers that don't teach a subject that's tested? Are they off the hook? And what we decided to do is, no, it's all hands on deck. We're all responsible for our student learning, the whole child, not just what these things measure. And we've really rallied around that. So the first part of doing that, a very focused manner, was our first faculty meeting. Instead of all meeting in here and doing the typical, here's some information sharing discussion, and having some objectives, we broke up into interdisciplinary groups. So we, for example, social studies and English, the humanities would meet together. Science and math, so our STEM group would meet together. And we had them all look at our MCAS data, look at our accountability data.
dissect it together. And it was really one of the best meetings that we've ever had. And the feedback was really strong because they were rolling up their sleeves, they were looking together at the work, at our student results, and coming up with conclusions on what we're doing well and what we need to improve. So we're working a lot smarter instead of a lot harder here in this case, and we developed a list from there. Now, where you see the crossover is now at our next professional learning community meeting. They take that data and the results from that faculty meeting, which is only an hour, but a lot of work and good work got done at that professional learning when they're in the departments now. They can dive a little deeper and look at, okay, the assignment for that meeting was taking the data from the assessments that we just, the outcomes that we came up with for a faculty meeting, dive in deeper and start looking at some trends. What are things that we need to focus on in our school overall? And I think if you jump to the third bullet, those are some of the examples that we came up with where we need improvement on. And the cool thing about this is that the staff came up with this. So what better way than the staff together, interdisciplinary, working together, came up with, okay, we need to do a better job at teaching our kids writing, analyzing, test-taking strategies, oral communication, presentations, and common vocabulary and language. And that's literacy in general, but it's pretty focused. So now the next step will be to take this and start discussing how that looks in the classrooms and how each department is going to roll that out for our students and how we're going to improve that. So I think that's really focused work, it's good work, and that's what's happening. And I gave, the second bullet there is the data focus and accountability. We were very clear that everything we do now, needs to be documented with data and proven. How are we going to show that our students are improving in writing, in analyzing, and test-taking, and oral presentations? Okay? So we're going to start that work too, so that when we have our observations, when we meet with teachers, when we have our department presentations at faculty meetings, we'll be able to clearly articulate what our goals and objectives are and how we will measure them. And so I think when we start doing that, we'll start seeing stronger outcomes versus arbitrarily each department doing their own thing. So that's something new for us, and the work is very focused. So I'm very optimistic that that will produce great work for our school, and we're all on board. So I think that mindset is shifting from I do what I do inside my own department and classroom to what we do as a school for our kids. This is where we need to work all our efforts here. So we all should be working on writing, analyzing, and how we're doing that. So, and that's directly proven from our assessment data that we've looked at. Not only the MCAS data, but our MAP data as well, internal data, has shown these trends. So in the past we've done this, but we've done it in pockets where each department would do it, and the other departments wouldn't know what they were doing and that kind of stuff. So I think this is a real eye-opener for all of us and very powerful. So instructional practices. Now we've got a goal for our working groups and times where we're together collaborating, how they'll work and the focus and goals we have towards improvement, very targeted goals. Now how does that translate to happening in our classrooms? The first one is focused and consistent feedback. And the district's focus for the last couple of years has been, higher order, critical thinking, and differentiation. It's one of the hardest things for teachers to do. If you have a class of 25 kids and one student's down here at this level, and maybe a 9th grade level in a 9th grade class, and someone might be at 11th grade level and everything in between, those teachers have to teach all those kids. And the secret to the success there is growth. No matter where their child comes into your classroom, you're responsible for a year's worth of growth and a year's worth of time at minimum. So we need to hold ourselves accountable for that, and that's where differentiation comes through. If you teach to the middle, kids up here aren't going to grow. If you teach too high, the kids that don't get those concepts are going to fall far behind. So there's a real focus to it, and that kind of is where our conversations are happening, is how do we do that? And that kind of ties in with targeted professional development that I'll get to, is that we, in fairness to the teachers, we have high expectations for them, but we also have to support them with training and feedback. And so our focused feedback is on those two areas, which are, simple to say, but very, very intensive. So critical thinking and the depth of knowledge, language that the district's using, and I got this from our other principals who are awesome and are using this. It's just a common vocabulary on what good teaching is and higher order skills are in your classroom, from the lowest level of rote memory to some higher order, breaking research problems down and being able to compare and contrast and analyze things. So when we go into our classrooms, we're able to sit with our teachers after and say, okay, where does this fall in the depth of knowledge chart? I mean, if the kids are memorizing vocabulary words or states, that's elementary or middle school. That shouldn't be going on here. We need to start thinking higher. So we're going to be pushing our level of focus up into higher levels of thinking in all of our classrooms. And that kind of ties in with the second bullet, which is our observations. The observation model the state has and schools have in general is anybody that's been in education. It's not great, but it's a minimal expectation. So what we're trying to do is get more out of it because the state sets a minimal expectation. And what we've done is, after every observation, contractually and technically, unless you're a new teacher, we would write that up in our software teach point. The teacher would read it and have an opportunity to respond and sign it, and then that's it. That's not always the best way, it's the most efficient way. What we've done that takes a lot more time and effort, but reaps higher benefits, is actually sitting with the teacher and talking with them before we write it up. And so contractually we can't make teachers do that, but what we found is we've invited every teacher after every observation to come in and talk to us about the lesson before we write it up, because there may be things we don't see. What did you do before the lesson? What was your intent? What happened when I left? What happens next class? What was students' prior knowledge? Where is this on the depth of knowledge? And those conversations have been some of the best I've had in my career. And they're really powerful, and the teachers really appreciate that time to be able to sit down, even if it's a 15-minute observation. You can learn a lot from that. And it's very powerful to have the teacher and the observer, the administrator, have a conversation about learning. That wasn't always happening in the past because it's very time-consuming. But you value what you measure. So now we're doing that. So I want to report that that's been awesome. And then it ties in with the third one here. So observations are a little different than walkthroughs. We don't necessarily report out on walkthroughs. They're a little briefer, with about 5 minutes time. They're just kind of getting a pulse of the school. And in the past, we would all do that, but we didn't have a coordinated way to do that. So myself and our two assistant principals have set up a Google Doc, and we have, 60, 70 teachers, so about 25 a week. We all do, and then we rotate, so that every week, all of our teachers will see one of us. And over the course of 3 weeks, we'll see the whole school. Each one of us as administrators will see every teacher in the school. We hold ourselves accountable to that at every Monday's leadership meeting. It's what we talk about. And we just get a pulse of the school. What's happening? What are you feeling when we walk into the classes? Is higher level teaching happening? Is differentiation happening? Is critical thinking happening? So those are kind of the conversations we have. And then after a couple of loops around, we have a really good understanding of what's happening in our school. And again, that was happening, but it wasn't as organized or as coordinated. And the teachers love seeing us in the class. We're in there all the time now because any administrator will tell you, if you don't schedule it and block it out in your schedule, and you say, okay, I'm going to get in 5 classes today, you won't. So we've committed to that, and we hold each other accountable, like I said, by coming into that Monday meeting, and you better not come in without having all your observations done, including me. And so that's really working well, and it's allowing us to get to see our kids, our teachers in action, and being visible, which is a huge part of this. So this is a little more intermediate or long-term. So just to summarize the first part, focus on some key areas that we need to improve as a school. The mindset of we're all in this together, all hands on deck, everybody's responsible for the learning of our kids in these domain areas, and then to figure out what we're going to do in each department along those lines, and have an action plan and a means of measuring those action plans. So here, the first one talks about our interventions. These are things that we came up with that were pretty creative at the time. When we started out, our math foundations class was, we were seeing a lot of our kids struggling with math, especially Algebra 2. So what we did was we set up a class that would run concurrently to that Algebra 2 in a small group capped at 8 to 10 students. And anybody that was failing or struggling in that class would then have an Algebra 2 foundations class. So, and it's a pass-fail class. So basically they'd go in there, they take the algebra class for the day, then they go into that foundations class taught by a certified math teacher and get support. So that's differentiation. Those kids are falling behind, but then they'd go in that extra class and then they get caught up in the skills they had that day. And initially, that was working very well. What our recent look has shown is that, after 5 years now of our school, we're in our 5th year, we're starting to reevaluate all these programs. And we're seeing that they've gotten watered down a little bit. So this particular foundations class has become more of a catch-all for, okay, we've got a couple of seniors that need the math course to graduate. They need help in math, or they need to take the MCAS, they haven't passed it, and it's their last chance. Let's get them in math foundations to get them some support there. And that's worked. But it's kind of, it lost its initial intention. So we have to refocus back on that. It served a purpose. It was helping those kids in math. It was helping our graduation rate, which we all know has worked. But we have to return to, that's going to be focused on students that are struggling in 8th and 9th grade math that need to take that 10th grade MCAS. And the same with Academic Center, if you're not familiar with that. We hired a certified English teacher to, the initial context of that course was for our 8th and 9th grades kids that were struggling in any academic core class would get that, similar to the foundations, concurrently in lieu of, I should say, an elective, so they have one less class of homework and to worry about, and that's kind of an organizational class where whatever they're working on and their other classes are getting overwhelmed with, that teacher helps them organize, communicates with other teachers and parents, and is kind of the glue that helps that child succeed. Overwhelming success with that program. To a fault. To now, which is so popular, we're doing some of the same stuff. If we have a senior that's, not passing the class to graduate, we put them in Academic Center because the teacher in there is working miracles with those kids. Because back to the original content, we know that kids are, 4 times less likely to graduate if they're not passing all their courses in 9th grade. So we're trying to get them before 9th grade, and that's where some of these programs were initially focused, and now they've expanded to serve other things, and we have to get back at the focus. So that's a couple of in-depth details of our programmatic view, and so we're tightening those things up as we speak. Our philosophy is we can't wait till next year because what about this year's kids? So even second semester, those two programs will be refocused, and kids will be in there that actually need them from the original intention. English Language Learning Program has nearly at least doubled since I've been here. I think the entire state is dealing with this. I know even at the elementaries, so it's going to continue to increase, and we haven't kept up with it programmatically. And so we've put a lot of work into this, working with Mr. Smith and Ms. Police, one of my assistants, on, we actually visited Barnstable last week and got a lot of great ideas. Big school district that's not new to this and really had a lot of good ideas. So we'll be seeing some changes there systemically to get ahead of that, kind of hit us like it did other schools where you may have kids move in that English is their second language, or they speak no English, and then they have to take the MCAS in a couple months, and that's not fair. So what do we do with those children to help them? So we're working on doing that. Special education, looking at our modified classes and looking at how we best support our students and what models we use. I will tell you at 100%, looking at our data, 100% of the kids that failed MCAS were either ELL students or students on IEPs, 100%. So good news is we're doing some good work in the core classes, but these two programs stuck out to us, ELL and our special education services and how we're doing that. So the good news is we've identified the problem and we are working on it, and you'll see a dramatic improvement in those areas, just systemically. So I think, part of our growing pains in year 5, our growth was going pretty good along the way, and now we've hit the wall, and now looking deeper into it, we're finding out, why. So that's the good news, is there's no secrets to us what's happening. The program of studies, this is another good example of what courses we're offering and which our focus should be. We kind of talked a little bit about, the state's looking at advanced course opportunity, and there's other things besides AP maybe we could be doing to offer more advanced courses and how we name them and what the curriculum is. And so we'll be looking at some of those things, which is going on right now. Our schedule. If you remember, our schedule went from an initial first year, a 2-day AB, 8 blocks, kids had 8 courses, down to a 7. And it's a good schedule, and there's no perfect schedule, but I think it's time, after a few years now, to get a committee together to assess our schedule and see if it's in line with what's best for our kids. And my guess right now is there's better schedules for us out there. And I think that would be a collective agreement between myself, my administrative team, and our school staff and students. So we've gotten a lot of feedback over the last year on our schedule, and maybe looking at that, looking at our current schedule and comparing it versus others and seeing, okay, what strengths or weaknesses do other schedules present that may help us in our need to improve our student learning. The next one is curriculum review, alignment, and focus. Just gave some examples of some things. And so again, Mr. Smith's come in and done a lot of work already. He's new, and we've got things in place, but I think what we found is we did a lot of work before we merged. A lot of curriculum was written and assessed and done nicely, and then over the last 5 years, although it's been done well, it's time for a review, kind of like everything else here. So we'll be looking at that, and to make sure that we have strong, updated, and focused curriculum, and that curriculum is being taught in the classrooms. Those are the two goals there. And those are some of our detailed goals up there over the next few years we want to get to and get done, and I think those will help us considerably. The summer school, we created our own. Kids weren't going. They weren't going to DY when we first opened the school. It was too much money, all those kinds of reasons. We started our own, and right off the bat, it helped our kids. So we're going to continue to review that. It is an online model, so we have to look at also, is online the best for all kids and for all subjects? That's the next step that we have to look at. I would argue that a teacher in the classroom is the best way kids learn versus a computer. So that's kind of what we're looking at now. When those kids go and they take and make that class up, is that really replacing the class that they missed or failed during the class year? So we need to tighten that up and look at it. We have an online credit recovery, just like pretty much all high schools do. And again, we're assessing that. And initially that started out for offering some high-flying kids that needed courses that we didn't offer. Maybe a language we don't offer. They wanted to take it for senior year and that kind of stuff, which is really cool. And it branched out to also help some of the students that have failed a course to take that over the summer or the next year to kind of catch up on credits. So we'll look at how we're doing that. It's a strong program, but the numbers have really increased dramatically, and so that's another program we think we need to look at. And then the focused professional development, I kind of alluded to this earlier. This is moving forward, and this is our work with central office and looking at our goals as a school versus the strategic plan goals and our school improvement goals, and really getting organized that our professional development is in line with what we expect in the classroom, is very focused. And the two examples I gave earlier were the differentiation and the higher order critical thinking. So if we were focusing, and we expect those that are our teachers, those are two areas I would surmise that we need work in for our staff. And then this next one is just one of my thoughts was, ELA and math placement assessment. We have the MAP assessment data. But I'd like to see potentially some type of an assessment that our 7th graders take before they come into 8th grade. And then right now what we do offer is a 7.5 course over the summer that's optional and free of charge. And we identify these kids in English and in math that are struggling so that when they come into 8th grade, they're not behind. We offer a summer course. It hasn't been highly attended. We get a couple a year. So that's a concern. My hope was that a placement assessment shared with the parents, basically showing them that your son or daughter is at a 6th grade level, let's say, and you're going into 8th grade. We're offering you this summer activity so that you can come into school equal with his or her peers. I think would go a long way towards helping convince parents that those kids need that. And the last thing, I know it's budget season, but in the ideal world, I mentioned some of our numbers. Some of our biggest class sizes are between 25 and 30 in their 10th grade English. And those are the kids that are getting tested. And class average is still pretty good. It's up around 18 or whatever for our schools, 16, 18. It's still good. But in those classes, in some of our math classes, the numbers are really high. So we'll look at that scheduling-wise. But our ELA staff is one of the smallest staffs, and an area in need, in my opinion. If we were to get a teacher, that's where it would be. And the next obvious one is an ELL position. We only have one teacher for approximately 25 students in that program. That's exploding. And for us to keep up and to expect that program to grow and our kids to succeed, that would be helpful. So I'll take any questions.
Comments, questions? Joe? Two hands.
I was
Here's lots of
trying to get a question in before Mr. Russell did today.
I was just going to ask, how often do you go to the nurse's office?
He couldn't help it. He had to jump in.
But I was unable to get the questions before Mr. Russell.
Thanks for saving me, Mr. Wilson. Now I know the question.
Could we go back to achievement growth short term? Can you get to that slide?
Sure.
Again? Yes, that one. Good. Well, the first thing I want to say is every time I hear you speak about education, teaching, and work at the high school, I yearn to be a teacher again.
Oh, we do miss you.
But as I was listening, I was thinking critically about differentiation, how it might apply to observations, and I wanted to provide some feedback today.
I appreciate
So
that.
this will be a kind of, I guess, one-sided public conversation on a couple of points that I actually do mean rather seriously, about things that I think you are doing and can do without getting into any crossfires over contracts. For example, the observations and walkthroughs. You know, the toughest part of a class, I think it's also what a pilot. I have children who are pilots, and they'll say the hardest thing is the takeoff and the landing. Well, beginning a class and ending a class, particularly for new teachers, the first 10 minutes are problematic. You can see issues of classroom management, expectations, verbal expectations, nonverbal expectations. You can see if students understand what they're supposed to be doing, how quickly people get settled into the assignments, and so on. A real good bang for the buck for administrators who don't have enough time, which is just another way of saying administrators, is the first 10 minutes of class. And then in the end, even veteran teachers sometimes have a real hard time figuring out how to land the plane because there's so many things going on. You want to tie in you want to end up the class discussion, you want to give the next assignment, you want to explain about what's coming up. You have to mention about getting the sign-ups returned for the field trips, and sometimes that last 10 minutes you try to do 10 things in 10 minutes, and you know what, you haven't done any of them. So how do you help a teacher land that plane? Professional collaboration. Is it possible for the principal to ask, not mandate, at a department meeting or instructional leader meetings, I'm not sure what the language is these days at the high school, but to say, invite teachers, you and department chair, can you invite teachers to observe your class? But start it with the new teachers. That is, people new to teaching, people new to the school. For teachers who are new to teaching, of course, all the observations you can have of a colleague is just wonderful, adding to experience. For people new to a district to come to understand the culture and ways and mores of that district, come in and observe a veteran teacher, and begin with the instructional leaders, begin with the department heads. It's really hard to get teacher-to-teacher observations. We're awfully shy about doing that, but if the leadership group, if the department heads start with that, it can create a real positive change in expectations of how teachers relate to one another. Let's see. One small point. I used to do something called a walk by. I don't even know if that's technically possible. I was coordinated because I never slipped or anything, but I used to walk for the English teachers. I thought we talked too much, as you can kind of gather I'm doing now. That laughter was a little painful. I had a department of 12 people, and when I had free time or non-teaching periods, I'd sometimes walk by our little designated English department area, and I was here's a list of the names, and I just check off. I just walk by the room, who's talking? who's talking. And after a couple of weeks, it was, I bet you can guess, we teachers were talking about 80-something to 90-something% of the time. We were doing all the talking, and it was awfully fine talking. It was very articulate talking by highly educated people. But we were talking, and kids were going, Yeah. Or when this was taking place in a one-on-one school, when I was teaching in Taiwan, the kids were just looking into their screens. We didn't know what the heck they were doing, but the teachers were just talking, and everyone was quiet, and the kids were on their screens. One drawback of really good, well-educated, articulate teachers is we just talk too darn much. And as long as we're talking, student learning and retention is sliding down, no matter how good your presentation is. If you have 4 or 5 periods a day that is rich in teacher talk, it's like, I don't know, it's like eating a cheesecake every hour. By the time you get to that third one, even if it's the cherry cheesecake and it's really good, you just can't digest it. So, I think I will...
So you go to the nurse's room.
It'll belly ache now.
Thank you.
I have nothing to say.
Thank you.
Can I address some of those?
There's just a number of things that can be done that are consistent with what you're doing to tweak the culture, that don't require contract negotiations. And I just want to thank you 100 times over for all the initiatives to actually talk to people instead of reading and signing. I think that is very time-consuming but irreplaceable. Just you gain so much so quickly in ways that you just can't do in any other way. And these are just thoughts for the long ride home. I'm not trying to put you on the spot to respond to any, or just some things to consider if you wish to consider them. And thank you for your presentation today. And thank you, Mr. Russell, for your help in my comments today.
I'll set you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Petrocio. I think it's all great advice. In fact, we're trying to do some of these things now that I didn't mention, so it reminded me of some things I'd like to share. Something unique that we do here, I think, that I didn't have when I was at other schools, which is our assistant principal, Mr. Olmo's idea, is teachers, and you mentioned new teachers. New teachers to our school, whether they're first-year teachers or just new to our school, we have voluntary meetings, kind of like what you said, we always ask. And a lot of times our teachers say yes, and that's the great thing about our school. So we have a new teacher monthly meetings, and what that turns into is they're voluntary, and attendance is usually 100%. And they used to be during Jocelyn time, they're now before school, and the teachers still are coming. And what we do there is, Janie will come in and have a guest speaker for the day. She might have the guidance director in to talk about scheduling, how to use Aspen, the culture of the school, all these types of things. They have 100 questions, whether you're a first-year teacher or a 10-year teacher, but you're new here. Some simple things like how do we do grade book, how do we write passes, all that kind of stuff. And as you know, we're really focused on culture. We want a sense of belonging. So those meetings are really powerful for our new staff. You mentioned beginning and end of classes. I agree 100%. That's where you can learn a lot from what's going on in the classroom. We call it bell-to-bell teaching. We shouldn't see kids out in the hallway before the bell. We shouldn't see teachers stopping before the bell, that kind of stuff. So I really like that point. And then the observations of other teachers. There's something called pineappling. If you Google pineapple charts, you'll see it. It's very interesting. And basically what it is the concept, of the Hawaiian culture would put a pineapple outside their door to welcome people. So teachers at schools would put a pineapple outside their doorway, welcoming other teachers to come in and observe their classes. And it's really the culture we want to get to, because peer observation is the best observation. A colleague's observation is non-threatening, it's non-evaluative, it's great. And the trouble with it is, do you always have the time to free teachers up? And last year, our teachers came up with the idea, and if you look outside our office, across from the bathrooms down near the guidance wing, you'll see a pineapple chart. And our teachers kind of started this at the end of last year and ran with it, where teachers would invite other teachers in on the board on a certain day of the week, a certain time, and other teachers would go in and check it out. And it was really awesome. We haven't picked the ball up this year. I think by mid-year, I think we started last year, so I think you'll start to see that again. But that's really powerful, and I couldn't agree more. That's some of the best conversations that teachers have is with each other. And I think the last thing you talked about was teacher talking. We do have those conversations with teachers because the mindset shift, I think, I think in the district we talk about this, is a shift from teaching to a shift of learning. I'll tell teachers, I don't care all you know. I know you know your stuff. I want to know what the kids know. And it reminds me of an old football coach I had that was the most brilliant man I ever met. He coached defense, and I played offense in college. And he knew so much, he could talk, and he'd know all the pro information, all the plays. But we'd get the night before the game, and our players were often confused. And our offensive coach was much simpler. Only had about 4 or 5 plays, but we knew them inside and out. So it's not what you know, it's what the kids know that really matters. So when we go in, we'll even actually time teachers, will have that conversation if it's the case you mentioned, Mr. Osceola, where a teacher is doing the sage on the stage, we call it, or the lecture. And there's little student engagement when that happens. So we'll say, did you know that when we were in there for 15 minutes, you talked 14? And the kids answered 1 minute of questions. And so that real data is helpful. It's not to embarrass the teacher, it's just what it is. So we do address that, we keep an eye on it, and the more the teacher talks, the less the kids are engaged, I think. So thank you.
Yes, Joanne?
I don't dare talk, just a quick question here. I applaud you having the departments work with each other, the interdisciplinary attempt of having the teachers look at data together. That does make sense. Just a question about when you have your teacher evaluation, you said you invite them in now to talk with you if they choose to. Do you have just a ballpark idea of how many have accepted that invitation?
I think 99.9%.
Oh,
Maybe one time, I don't know if the teacher was busy or not. Yeah.
Terrific.
All of them, pretty much.
That's good.
That is very good.
That's a wonderful.
It is, and now it becomes the culture. I think teachers are dying for feedback, and that was on me in the past, not offering them that.
Yeah.
We did it for all our new teachers, but we kind of, we just did, that's the way it said it in the contract in the book, and so we did it, and we started thinking, the most powerful ways of learning is to have a talk. Just
That's
converse.
rich. That is.
So, and I've had teachers now that invited me back after that conversation and said, I'd like to see this, this, and this. You did this wonderful, this, I'd like to see again. Oh, well, come in next week and I want to try it. And so that's happening now, so I think that's contagious. So I'm really excited where it's going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sure.
I don't have any advice, but the comments I have are that I really appreciate the way you were very committed about doing those walkthroughs and even detailing that you've got it on your calendar so it makes it happen. That's really very clear and helpful, and I know that when I've seen this done before, teachers get used to it and they don't feel threatened by it. Also, when you were talking about that you have high expectations, but you also give the supports for the teachers of the training, and it's great to say what we do for kids, but when we're providing the same type of thing for teachers, I think that's fabulous. During the time that I taught, the 39 years or so, it was very rare when people had a chance. We all thought that we knew what each other did, but it was very rare that people actually were in seeing a classroom lesson. And so those kind of things where, especially when people have best practice exemplar things, it's wonderful. And lastly, I want to say that whenever I come to this school and there's somebody near the door when I'm entering, a student, they open the door, they say hi, they talk to you. There'll be kids someplace else looking at their devices, but anyone that's right there, in 40 times that I've come through here, they've always been friendly. I don't find that, and I don't mean in other Monomoy schools, but in other school systems that I've been in or go into at all. So thanks.
Thank you. I think I've heard that a lot, more so here than I've heard in my life. And it's a credit to the kids and to their parents and guardians and our teachers for just, we teach manners here. It's important.
I had one comment. I was doing well, but I have to say something. Two things, a comment. Prior to the overview present to us, Bill, you mentioned one of the categories of absenteeism. And I wonder, it's too obvious, of course, and I'm sure Ms. Police and the crew, before the guidance comes, have they looked up those 25 youngsters and matching their academic failures with their absenteeism? I'm sure it's a given, so that would be interesting to, I know it's too easy to say that's their prime problem, there's more than that, but that might be a look-see. I like the list on the page you finish off on program review and assessments. Best practices. Emery and I have a daughter coming home in 8 years from Africa. She hasn't been here for a holiday, so we've got our list in the past month to get the house looking like it should during the holidays. And what an ideal situation for you, looking at these 9 items, there probably could be 18, whether they're good or getting better, or whatever you have, because we've got a gathering coming up too here in a year with our New England College visit. So as you look through this and glean through best practices, that can't do anything but help us once 12 months from now, whatever that date is, when they start to launch and visit. So thanks for sharing.
Yep, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for what you do when you do reporting, because you're always very thorough, and I think it says a lot about your leadership, where I think every time you have a challenge, one of the first things you say is, it starts with the administration and I own it. And I think that leading by example, I think that's just excellent. And I really appreciate how when you have a challenge and you're looking to improve something in the school, your first thought is collaborating with everyone. It's not, all right, this is what I think we should do. You're collaborating with the teachers who are actually going to be doing the hard work. So I know of other schools that don't do that, and I think it's very telling of how the teachers all work well together. And then I also like how when you looked back at the foundations and the academic center, and how I remember when the school opened and the Math Foundations course, because it was filling a need for the math, and the math needed help, especially at the 8th grade, leading up to MCAS, and that was started for those students, and I can completely see where it has merged into, well, this kid needs help in math too, and well, this kid needs help, so why not? And so I can see that, and I very much appreciate how you're going back to the roots of what those 2 programs were designed for, and I think that putting them back to what they were designed to be, and then in addition adding something for the juniors and seniors who are looking for the math support, adding another course in there for those students, because it is a need for them in their upper high school, the upperclassmen years. I had let's see. And then my other thought was, you mentioned about ELA and math placement for rising 8th graders, and I see where you're going with that in terms of the lower performing students. And one thing that I came across as a parent of an incoming 8th grader a couple years ago was a language assessment. I don't know what that could fall into, because the middle school language programs are so strong that when the 8th graders are coming in, maybe they're not needing to take the first year Latin or the first year Spanish class because they had those 3 years at the middle school. So just something to think about. I don't know what it would take. I don't know if it's even allowable to take a Latin 1 exam for credit or not credit, but just something to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. My just quick answer would be, why would we have a kid that's ready for Latin 2 take Latin 1? So I think conceptually that makes a lot of sense. So we can look into that for sure. Just makes sense.
Yeah. It just, I know the middle school program is very strong.
Right.
So
Latin's very popular. And I think that's one advantage of having the 8th grade at the high school, having access to upper level classes that they wouldn't in the middle school.
Well, and that would also push them for more upper level when they get to be juniors and seniors, because they already go through the 5th year of a language or a AP course. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, Bill. On the second point of the mind sets shift data focus / accountability. Example, the grade 8 PLC map work. Is there any physical work in that area right now to assess kids before MCAS?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think I missed that example, so thank you. I talked about the data part, but I didn't give one of the examples. So in the past, what we have is our 8th grade teams have a common meeting time where they'll talk about students, how to support them, have meetings with parents during that time. It's kind of the middle school model, which we're able to do within our high school schedule, which is strong. What we did last year in the past is we would break down our map data from our kids. So the kids would take the map data, we'd look at it, those periods are 60 minutes, and we were finding it was kind of rushed, it wasn't enough time, and then by the next time we meet, it was a 7-day cycle, it was 10 days or a holiday in there, it's a month later, and then the data's old. So what we did this last meeting is we pulled those 8th grade teachers out of their PLC time, because they can catch up on that work, the interdepartmental work we talked about, and they met as teams and had the 90-minute PLC time to sit and examine and assess the map data in the student work. And I sat in on all those meetings, and it was more time, it was more focused and more beneficial, and they already come up with ideas on certain skill sets and students that need that work, which we weren't doing last year right away.
Mike, I was just wondering, does this go beyond the grade 8, like with grade 9, grade 10, and all that?
As far as
for the
map?
Similar map type?
Yeah, right now we test
assessment?
8th and 9th grade in the map only. We don't do 10 through 12 right now. It's
Okay.
10th grade is the MCAS and 12th is graduation. But I believe
So
it does
8th
go
and
through
9th?
12, and,
8th and
Scott
9th.
has talked about expanding it when we get 8 and 9 down. Yes, correct. Yep.
All right, well, thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Transportation?
So just to continue the conversation from where we left off at the last school committee meeting, and to try to clarify some misconceptions out there. At the last school committee meeting, I shared with the committee that we had no bidders on our transportation contract, and we had gone out this past month to solicit bids for transportation with, for all intents and purposes, the same bid spec that we've used the last 3 times that we've gone out for a transportation bid. I think the only minor change in the bid spec was the requirement that the transportation provider use a computerized routing software for the buses that we would be able to see. And despite at least interest from a number of bus entities, including Cape Destinations, our current provider, we got no bids. And the way state procurement laws go, if you have no bids, you can't award a contract to somebody that doesn't bid. So I think there's some confusion that I think there's some that think that we have given the transportation to another entity, not Cape Destinations, and there's just no bid. So what we do have the ability to do is to reach out and work with Cape Cod Collaborative to secure transportation. As I indicated, we would have the option potentially, if we went out to bid right now, to potentially, after you go through the advertisement and get the bids and open them, to potentially try for a 3rd time to get some transportation company to bid. The challenge is, if they don't, we potentially lose our window to secure buses and drivers in time for September. So my recommendation last time we met as a committee was to have us go explore with the Cape Cod Collaborative transportation, and how do we get there, how do we make sure that we've got buses and drivers and routes set by September of next year. So what I've given you today is a Today, Katie and I met with Paul Hilton, who's the Executive Director of Cape Cod Collaborative, Amy Lipkind, who is their business manager, and Mark Dupree, former superintendent, who's a consultant that helps them with transportation at the collaborative, just to discuss how do we get from where we are right now and securing them as the new vendor. So this is sort of a timeline of all the things that we need to do with them to essentially take transportation largely in-house as we move forward. So I think one of the key things is that I think our next school committee meeting is January 10th. I think it would behoove us at our first school committee meeting in January to potentially, I think there's going to be a series of different votes that are going to be needed, but I think the committee, or I would encourage you to, we could have the collaborative come and they could do a little presentation on how they do transportation. But I would encourage you to have a vote to generate an MOA with them. Their board would have to actually vote to engage, to agree to provide the transportation services for the district. Then we'd have to create the MOA, and both boards would then have to vote on that MOA. But again, we start to have a tight timeline early on in terms of making sure we get this launched and started and start working towards securing bus drivers and buses for the upcoming school year. I mean, it seems that September's off there in the future, but September comes along really fast when you still have to get drivers and buses in place. And I think one of the other things, just to clarify, all of our current drivers, we'll be reaching out to them, would be welcome to, to drive for us in the future. It's just with a different vendor providing the transportation.
Yes, I'm a little confused, and this happened so fast last meeting. I'm used to us just having a certain local bus company. So I don't know a lot about the Cape Cod Collaborative, but I understand, if I'm correct, that we work with them to build all this, and in that we purchase the buses, or help them purchase the buses. And then, if I'm correct, we have liability on this that we don't have if we were with a local bus company. Am I correct on these things? I'm not really clear.
So they would lease the buses and would be an agency by which we would lease the buses, and we would have the same sorts of liability, when it comes to getting kids to school that we currently do. That organization would become our provider, but we would work with them on working out the logistics of how does dispatch happen, and currently if Nancy has a problem on a bus route, she's directed to call Cape Destinations and call Gretchen, and so it's like work out the logistics on who are they calling, and is that person located here, or is that person located somewhere, is that person located in Osterville where their main operation is, or they now have, they're now doing Bourne, Nauset, Mashpee. Is it possible that we can find some way to work with one of those other school districts, to share some aspects of dispatch too?
So along this line, I wasn't clear with what went on last time. Would it still be possible? I'm thinking of costs and going local. Of course, all these are local. But would it be possible to encourage people that haven't bid to bid and at the same time do this? Or do you have to, at this point, choose one or the other?
You really have to go choose choose one or the other. You can't, you know, Katie is our procurement person, can talk about how you go about that, but we can't just go and say to a local company, you know, we want you to do our transportation. We put out the bid spec, you know, they know it's out there, you know, they have the option to bid on a job or not.
And what we would have to do is start the whole bidding process all over again, which is advertising in the newspaper, advertising in goods and services. So it would take probably 6 weeks for the whole process, advertise in the Cape Cod Times, as we do all the time, on the district website, bulletin board, as well as what I do is I send out, when we have a bid of this type or any type, send it out to local vendors. They get all the documentation, whether they ask for it or not. I send it out to them to have it be a fair, open process, which is what it was. We can't force anybody to submit a bid, but you know, we encourage everybody to do so. But it would have to start. You have to start the whole process again, and I'm concerned about the time and the fact that, you know, when we went out to bid initially in 2014, we had one bidder. When we, you know, went to do the renewal, we had no bidders. The bidder that we had, the current provider, was the provider before that. So I was hoping, because there are some new vendors that have come onto the Cape, that this would have been a time that perhaps one of the other vendors was looking to expand, and it was good, some good healthy competition on 3 local vendors perhaps. That did not happen. So it was a fair, open process, and here we are, and we're fortunate that we have an alternative with the collaborative, and it'll be a learning experience, but a challenge that I think we're up to the task to figure it all out. And hopefully on the parents and the families' end, they won't notice it, you know, their kids will get picked up, and they'll just be, the buses will look, you know, the print will say Monomoy and Cape Cod Collaborative versus Monomoy and Cape Destinations.
So did the Cape Cod Collaborative put in a bid when we asked for bids?
They're not required to bid because we are the collaborative, and you know, it's an opinion that has been a precedent set by the Attorney General's office, that because we are the collaborative and a member of the collaborative, it's a different process than a private vendor bidding on a public contract.
So I think part of what people locally that I've heard about are upset about is that people don't understand, or they have a hard time accepting that there's an opinion that, and I don't have an opinion, that it's unfair to local private bus companies to bid when Cape Cod Collaborative doesn't, or can come in under bid or something like that. I was more worried that they'd come in overbid than the others.
The bottom line is that the vendor chose not to submit a bid.
Yeah, I get it.
I think just, it's also important to understand that this sort of 3-page list of everything that needs to happen between now and September are things that, you know, fall on Katie and I to make sure that they happen. It's, you know, in many ways, we would have loved to see someone else bid on the job, because this is some, you know, some challenges that we'd prefer to have another company manage, not to have us take largely in-house.
And the other question is, have you, either of you, talked with those, you know, Mashpee, Nauset, companies that have dealt with collaborative, so we feel comfortable with that when we're going through all this process, we're going to be okay at the end?
Yes, the superintendent and I met on Monday with the business manager from Mashpee, and Mashpee was the first district that went, and, you know, he lovingly refers to them as they were the guinea pig, and if he had to do it all over again, he'd do the same thing. And then I also spoke with the business manager at Nauset, and this year they've transitioned over to that, and talked specifically, you know, kind of, you know, what should we be looking out for, and what are some of the things that we might not be thinking about. So we've had those open conversations. I just haven't spoken to the business manager in Bourne, but the other 2 colleagues, you know, were very forthcoming with information.
Okay, good, thank you.
Terry?
Katie, I echo you. I think we're out of options, and I think we're fortunate that even though it's middle of December, that quickly glancing at the Paul's timeframe as to how to make up a match, I think it's appropriate on the 10th for us to invite that team to come here, to not only Sharon, but all of us to have any questions, and still will be on a time frame where we can make this thing move as if to kind of move beyond the fact that we only had one bidder and it was a strikeout. So despite that, my brief time being a member of the collaborative, I was impressed with their executive director and the operations that they have that's available to now growing to so many towns and villages on the Cape, that I see if it's the alternative we take, that we're fortunate they're able to be early January making a decision to say yes to it. So I welcome them being able to come.
Anyone else? Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome.
Don't go away.
She tried.
Okay, budget, expenditure, and revenues.
I don't think I identified myself before. Katie Isernio, business manager, and I remain to be such. In your packets were the revenues and expenditures through October 31st, and where we are at that point, we have an unencumbered, unexpended balance of 6.68% of the budget, or $2.6 million. As you know, the bulk of the budget we like to encumber at the beginning of the year, but there are many things that we don't. Long-term substitutes, some of the coaches I don't think were encumbered at this point. We were still making some assignments into the different sports, so those weren't encumbered. We're right on track. I don't see anything at this point that's causing us any, it's what we had anticipated our expenditures to be. The revenues, again, those two are right where they should be. The bulk of our revenues are from the two towns in the assessments, and we've gotten the payments right on track with those. More importantly, what you have in your packet is our excess and deficiency was certified by the Department of Revenue, and our E&D is certified this year at $1,592,984. It's about $300,000 less than our E&D certified in FY17 for 18. And we had used, to support this current year's budget, $705,000 of the E&D. That 1.5 factors that in already. So that's where we're starting when we're talking budgets, and if we need to use any or E&D to offset the FY20 budget, that's the basis of which we would use. So we're at just over 4%, which was our target when we did our 5-year plan. I don't know if anyone has any questions about either one of those.
Anyone? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Preliminary FY.
That's me. So this is the time of year where I am supposed to provide to you at least a high-level preliminary budget conversation. Today, Katie and I met with the finance directors from Harwich and Chatham, along with the Harwich town manager, to just share with them where we are with the budget, and I have shared with our with the MREA when I was meeting with them in our sort of monthly meeting, just my my thoughts on where we are with this year's budget. I think, long and short, of the budgets that Katie and I have had to bring before you, this will be the most challenging budget year we've had in the 6 years that I've been here. It's at the moment we have a level staffed budget. And I think I've been glad that over the last handful of years, we've been able to move forward level-staffed budgets. This one's going to be a challenge because Harwich's fiscal wherewithal in any given year tends to be about 3.25% growth on the assessment. The challenge that we have is when we look at the numbers as they're currently standing in a level-staffed budget, we are almost $1 million over that 3.25% threshold and how it plays out in the assessments for the two towns. There are some things that are major drivers in that, and I think probably in descending order, this is what they would be. We're anticipating a very significant uptick in out-of-district special education placements and costs for next year. At least in the 6 years that I've been here with the district, that has been a non-issue for us. But my understanding is in the year or two before I got here, that was an issue that the towns were having to wrestle with. And I remember very much as I was first coming here, these conversations about this $800,000 issue from before, before I started as superintendent. Well, we have a challenge coming in with this budget that's rather significant. We also have significantly less excess and deficiency that we will be able to use to support this year's budget versus last year's budget. Last year's budget, we used $705,000 of excess and deficiency, our reserves, to support the budget that we have. We've built this budget, at least at the moment, using $550,000 of excess and deficiency. So that's a swing of, $155,000 that's causing some of that shift in assessment. The third thing is, as we were just talking about, we were anticipating going out for a new transportation provider. We were lucky that the last year in our previous bus contract was a 0% increase. And what typically happens in bus contracts is you see an appreciable increase, when you go out to bid again. So we were carrying, an appreciable increase, about 10%. And I'm cautiously optimistic that we can, we'll stay within that with the Cape Cod Collaborative, but still, that's still a 10% increase on our transportation over where we were in the previous fiscal year. The fourth factor, we're carrying currently a 10% increase in health insurance. We're not going to know where that truly falls. Maybe it's going to be 5%, knock on wood, but conservatively, we're carrying 10% in this. Fifth factor, while I mentioned that this is a level staff budget that we're moving forward to you, there's some shifting of staff. And one of the areas that we need more support tends to be on the school psychology and teen chair areas that deal primarily with our special ed students. Challenges we have are those people, when you hire them, tend to not be your master step one hires. They tend to be very experienced individuals and are high on the pay scale and columns. So it's level staffed, but we're shifting some less expensive staffing and needing some more expensive staffing, although it's the same number of bodies. And the next thing that I think hits us that's of import is there are a few grants that we'll go into in detail later that are ending, and to keep those programs going, we have those funds show up in the regular budget. So there's a number of different things that build up to one of those proverbial perfect storms of budget season. So I have asked our principals to gather with the central office team on the 4th after we get back to really roll up our sleeves and sort of prioritize what our needs are. I'll be having Leah schedule a meeting with the finance subcommittee because we'll be in very much after the New Year's break an open field run because we'll come back, I'll meet with the principals, we'll meet with the finance subcommittee. On the 10th, we have our meeting, our school committee meeting, and the following Tuesday, we have to have the budgets printed and put into the libraries and to town halls. So it's all coming quite quickly, and a decision that the finance subcommittee will need to make with us and that the school committee will ultimately need to make is what is the magic number that we need to stay within. And, so we understand what the wherewithal is for Harwich historically, but we also have some pretty profound needs above and beyond that number that we need to make sure get addressed. And so as I said, it's a very challenging budget year. There are still some things that we don't know, and those pieces of information always come after we publish that first round of budget. We don't know what the state aid is going to look like. We don't know if it's going to go up or down. We don't know how the minimum required contribution is going to shift. If you recall, last year there was a little shift in the minimum contribution shifted towards Harwich, and it's a good sign on some level that it shifts towards Harwich because it means that the economy in Harwich is doing a little bit better, that property values and incomes are up. But it also means that it impacted how that assessment hit Harwich. So we won't know how that minimum contribution is going to play out, and we won't know until later January, early February, what the final health insurance increase number is going to be. But the punchline that we shared with our two towns, if we were to go with this all-in budget, the budget increase itself is a 5.25% increase in budget. The assessment increase, and remember, assessment is what the bill the town gets, and that not having as much excess and deficiency to use means that the assessment's going to be higher than the budget increase. So the assessment increase is a 6.09% assessment increase, but it hits the two towns slightly differently. In Harwich, that assessment increase could be about 6.25%, which is about $767,000 above that 3.5% that I started with. So it's a challenging budget year, and there are some challenging things that we're going to need to work with and manage as we go through this fiscal year.
It's the bearer of great news.
Yep.
Next. We don't want to talk about that anymore.
Ho, ho, ho.
Okay. Then the IMA on HES field use.
So in your packets, to kind of go back to where we were, there's the picture with the red line where the town of Harwich is suggesting the exclusive use line fall. There were some conversations that we had, and I think Sharon went and spoke before the selectmen. I had also met with Chris Clark and Julie Kavanaugh. I was discussing with them your concerns or the concerns I heard at the last school committee meeting. And there is verbiage that the town manager has provided back to us that I think goes a long way towards, I think, hopefully mitigating some of the concerns. I think some of the things to point out here is that they emphasize that the agreement shall not prohibit the school district and the town working together to allow each other to use the property or to improve the grounds or structures. And I think one of the key things that Chris took out of our lease agreement is this notion of peaceful and quiet use of the fields. And it says that Monomoy shall have peaceful and quiet use of the fields on the Harwich side during school hours for student use to facilitate the education program of students. Harwich shall not schedule events on the field during normal school hours. Now, what they mean by peaceful and quiet use does not mean that the kids have to be quiet if they're on the field. It just means that the town's not going to go and put up a fuss if we say, hey, we want to have field day out there. The town largely will consider the fields ours to use during the school hours. So I think that wording goes a long way to sort of protecting the school district's interests. And I know that Sharon had conversations with the group.
I'd just like to say that what's in here is better than what we had before, and I appreciate that. But I just want to read, in our regional agreement, under, this is the present one, on page 4, and its locations, ownership of school, and then if you go to 5, page 5, E talks about Chatham, but F says, the town of Harwich shall lease to the regional school committee the land and/or buildings at the option of the committee, presently known as the elementary school, as well as the land and/or the buildings at the option of the committee, presently known as the middle school, and then it goes on from that. So my interpretation of that is that the lease now is for the land, which we're only talking about the back of the middle school, the former middle school, now Culture Center. And I do appreciate that this states the kids will have the use during the school day. I wanted it to also say after school hours. I do appreciate that they're talking about, well, maybe there'll be Eric Beebe's, the program from the community center, and it would be for the kids. There are many things I do appreciate, but the reason I cannot support this personally is because it gives up at the discretion of the committee to have the lease. Now it's at the discretion of the town, and they're letting us use it. So my concern, as I've tried to express, not so eloquently as Joe sometimes or Terry talks, but is that my concern is that now moving this, even though it says a lot of things right now, that it can go because it will no longer be at the discretion of the committee to the town to make a lot of decisions, and it's just moving away from the schools. So I'm concerned over the long run that something that can happen to that, and I expect something will.
Terry?
Last week when this was brought up, or 2 weeks ago, I shared Sharon's concern, and I think I voiced my interest in making certain those kids had the opportunity to use the fields. And I looked towards Mary. She might have been there to see what experience was going on. That being said, and my personal feeling now is the former Sisson Middle School ceased to be a middle school, and the town had the full right to turn it into whatever they wish to park, or in this case now a building to serve the needs of a cultural experience in town. That being the case, there's a different, from their view, what that property may in the future look like. D&E absolutely satisfies my view on what the school could use, as long as I would voice with Mary, is there something that I'm missing? I read this 5 minutes ago, so I see E especially, from the school day at 7:30 or 8 or whatever the time is to the end of school. We have full use of it, the entire fields, and that was my intention, that seems to be a priority, and I think Chris, whoever designed this, addresses that, and if there's any other occasions that need to be done, D takes care of that. So in the spirit of cooperation, I really appreciate Sharon, but I don't see in 5 or 10 or 15 years, with the way health is going here in the schools, I know where I'm going to be in that length of time. So I'm not going to worry too much about long-term, hey, that's our field. I think this is a healthy compromise. And if actually, again, Mary, if you see something I'm missing before we take a vote, then go to it.
You have an obstacle course to get up.
I feel like the two adjustments really do satisfy the needs of the school. Our children do play out on beyond the exclusive use line every day, and we've never had any issues with being able to do that. We have field day out there. They're great exercising. The Walk to Read program uses the perimeter of the fields every spring, and there have never been any issues. So it seems as if those additions protect that right. And I will assure you, though, however, it is not quiet and peaceful use on any day out there. So, but thank you.
Jackie? I apologize, but Scott, can you just bring me back full circle on why we are at a point of needing a mutual agreed upon memorandum for, is it the town of Harwich wanting to draw a red line property line?
Correct.
Okay. So nothing's changing. They just want a line in the sand. So what is the purpose of the line?
I think
if we're still using it for the same purpose we have before.
I think on a bit of a comic level, there always was a line out there. There never was really meant to be a line. I think I once upon a time did a presentation where I took a Google Earth shot of the property and just kind of in Photoshop drew a little line saying, here, these are the fields we want to make sure are preserved. And then it became, how is that surveyed and everything else? And so I think this is the town just trying to clarify what's theirs to go and take care of and mow, and what's ours to take care of. So
I'm kind of at a why now, and maybe it's just as random as it seems to me, and also legal and liability wise.
Maintenance?
I actually think that at the time when I was photoshopping a line, I don't think the town had a vision of what the building was going to be. It was potentially going to be given over for housing, and I was just kind of clarifying, let's make sure that the fields are preserved, so hence the line was sort of going parallel with the backside of the building to preserve the fields for use for kids in Little League and the school. And I think now that building has become more of we're going to keep the building for the town, turn it into a cultural center, let's go potentially improve the parks, and there have been conversations on, or to improve what's behind and around the building. I think now the town's just trying to sort of demarcate what's on their side and is theirs to take care of versus what's ours to take care of.
Something happens on either side of the red line, who determines who's responsible for what happened? It's all the same still? So if something happens on the cultural center side, legally they're liable, and if something happens on our side, we're legally liable? Is that in our lease somewhere?
Well, one might say if it happens on our side, it's an insurance policy that we get through the town. So it's because we are a part of the town on in each side.
But the district's responsible for the deductible?
Too many insurance questions.
Just asking.
I'm getting the nod from the business manager.
Yes, so we are still responsible for the deductible out of our budget for any liability that happens on our side of the property. But if something were to happen in the Harwich cultural side, what
Just
if
make sure you cross that
We've
line.
reduced our culpability.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Want to know,
Make sure you
fair?
cross the line.
Call the nurse.
It's not like a legal line, it's not a property line, it's literally a red line on a drawing. This is why I'm like, why change anything?
Sharon?
So I'm just going to follow up on what Scott said about this line. So there was a time when Terry and I, Ed Jaworski, and I forget who else, but the Harwich members of the Monomoy School Committee walked that space with Scott. But this was like 2013, 2014, somewhere around then. And just as Scott said, we looked out there and recommended a line that would go parallel with the building, straight across, including all this land that they're talking about. So there's been this discussion here and there about the line, but neither we, as a school committee, didn't take this up and vote on it at that time, which presently I regret, or the town didn't press it. I think that there are members on the present select board, but in future select boards, so right now the culture center's flourishing. They're renting the portables behind it. It's going very well. And so maybe everything will go fine for the way this is talking about. I do think past my lifetime, because I don't know how long that will be. But I just think that, all of our boards are made up of just individuals. And so things change. My only feeling is that I want for the next generation to be able to have this, not just 5 or 10 years. That's all.
Yes.
I agree, I look at it like I did the last meeting. This has to do with our lease. This has nothing to do with a memorandum of agreement. And if something were to happen down the road, when you have all new members to a board of selectmen, then that's something you take up with what your lease says and how the lines are drawn at that point. I see it as two separate things. And then I also, see Chatham playing really well in the sandbox, no pun intended, but sharing all types of fields and different aspects of that property at the Chatham Elementary and the middle school as well, with no definitive lines and no problem. So this is just a little frustrating to me that it's a request from the town selectmen of Harwich when Chatham is so forthright with everything that they provide to the district.
Terry?
I think it's fairly forward. I don't know the motivation behind the selectmen and the town manager deciding now to try to bring clarification to this, but there is somewhat different between this property and the Chatham Elementary School building property. There is no issue shared property with the Chatham Fire Station next door. That's quite clear to the local township in Chatham. So this is somewhat clouded because it was a common two schools, the middle school of Harwich and Chatham Elementary. Once we regionalized, we decided Chatham High School would become the Monomoy Middle School. Thus, the Harwich Middle School sat vacant with several years of discussion and study committees as to what to do with it. And there was a lot of yin and yang regarding what's the best idea, and that still is out there in the community. From raising it for hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nice park to elderly housing or something in between, that something ended up a year or two ago being a setting for cultural experiences. I think the town just wants to clarify, as this moves in one direction, for that building to be not a former middle school, but the cultural center. Again, and I'm repeating myself, I have no issue now that we run a building that runs from 7 o'clock to 3 to 4. I don't think the political police will come running in at 4:30 if someone is still there. So I think we're working out a cooperation with the Harwich, which is 2/3 the budget finance. So to me, this is item E says all school hours, every day, all year long, the principal can designate teachers to go out to the entire acreage I'd like to move the question and vote on it so we can move on.
Okay. Nancy?
He wants to move the question.
Oh,
I get cut off because he wants to move the question.
okay.
He trumped her.
Pardon me?
He trumped her.
Yes, so I move the question, I guess I need a second.
Second. I don't need to talk.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
To this, to what, moving the question?
Yes. that
Yes.
would be-
Yeah.
Yes, aye.
Are you opposing?
If it's just to moving the question, to vote on it, I'm okay.
We're moving the question. So we're no longer going to discuss, we're now going to vote.
Yes, that's fine. Aye.
Okay. So now-
So now we are going to vote on the intermunicipal agreement.
So I need a motion, right?
Sure. I'll make the motion. I move to approve the intermunicipal agreement between the Town of Harwich and Monomoy Regional School District for designation of exclusive use line between Harwich Elementary and the Cultural Center.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Opposed.
2?
Motion carries.
Oh, what?
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now where am I? Strategic plan, is this?
All right, so in your packets, we have the, we'll call it a relatively finalized version of the strategic plan. There's now a letter from me in English. I translated the Latin one that I had written.
That's how we're going to be high achieving.
There's also a letter there from Donna for the introduction. There's sort of a narrative on how we went through the strategic planning process in this. The last time we met, we went through the first 2 strategic objectives, which took us, I believe, up through page 20, up through page 20 on this document. So what I'd like to do is just everything from page 1 to page 20 we've already covered.
Okay.
So you can see the screen better. We've decided to turn off the lights.
Thank you for dimming the lights for the show.
Yeah, I think there are some side lights we can push.
Over here?
Oh, that's
And there might be one on the other side that,
Oh, we're good now.
and I think that's all we're going to get. I think the other ones might.
Great
success.
Right.
Scene 4, by the way.
Clapper.
We say when we're done.
Clap on, clap off. So what I'd like to do is we didn't change pages, the first 20 pages. I think there was one friendly suggestion that Joe made that we incorporated into this. The Strategic Planning Steering Committee met and we went over the last two strategic objective, or the last two strategic objective 3 and 4. So I'd like to kind of pick up on page 21, walk you through this, and ideally seek a vote to accept this so we can start moving forward on it. And Joy will kind of scroll through and sort of project as I go through this. So the strategic objective number 3 was to close the achievement gap. Monomoy Regional School District will close the achievement gap by developing and implementing targeted instruction and supports to improve outcomes for the largest and most persistent achievement gaps. The first initiative towards that is to improve our support for differences of all types within Monomoy's classrooms. And to do that, we would have the following action steps. The first action step, in order to increase respect, empathy, and appreciation of differences that exist within our educational community, to promote problem-solving skills around difficult issues, to promote teamwork, collaboration, and to promote individual awareness of internal bias beliefs. We'll budget and provide the equivalent of 1 workshop day for diversity training for Monomoy staff, as well as expanding the internal capacity by involving interested staff and students in further training. In that, to measure it, we would, look at, the number of teachers that are able to get this training, and ideally budget for this as we look forward into the 2020 budget and beyond to provide more advanced training. Action step 1B, in order to better support differences in learning styles, budget, and provide the equivalent of one workshop day focused on differentiation of instruction. So again, to see how, measure it by the number of teachers that actually get this differentiation training, and ideally we should be able to see fewer students requiring Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports if their needs are being met within the classroom itself. The second initiative under Closing the Achievement Gap is to implement appropriate appropriate research-based data-guided innovative practices. Towards that end, action step 2A, to build capacity for personalized learning environments within the Monomoy schools by developing and designing promising technology-rich instructional models, a plan to support the necessary professional development to embed technology into instructional practices, and tools for monitoring growth towards the creation of a district-wide personalized learning environment. So again, this is really looking to leverage technology to make the instruction that's happening more individualized. And again, this would be exploring in the current year the district's needs, creating a technology team that would really be focused on developing a technology professional development plan and then implement it in 2021. Action step 2B, align all schools with a district-wide response to intervention framework, which would involve refining the English language learners support and instruction, exploring ways within each school's schedule to have time for enrichment, support, and interpersonal connection, while also ensuring academic improvement, and lastly, to develop a system for academic intervention and support at the high school. So again, we would measure it by looking how each school in the district is implementing the RTI rubric, and again, looking at this over a three-year period, and ultimately reporting out progress.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What would determine what's appropriate in the initiative to implement appropriate research-based? Is that, then it says to provide the differential. Who is responsible?
Which page are we on?
22.
22.
Initiative 2, implement appropriate research-based.
So I think when we look at who's looking at it, I think that's really, it would be the administrative team would be working as a group to look at, and in some cases, bringing in other educators as part of these conversations to look at models that that may exist in other school districts. Again, trying to find ones that would be appropriate for us and our situation here.
Responsible for that. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Let's see, I think we're on page 24. Initiative 3 is work with the community partners to enhance early learning within our towns. The action step to support the adoption of universal pre-K in our towns by partnering with each town to expand opportunities for preschoolers to develop language, early literacy, numeracy skills, social emotional skills, and by supporting parent education through the leadership effort of the Monomoy Family Resource Coordinator. We started last year talking about how we might be able to use classroom space that we have within our school districts for preschool, but this is sort of going beyond to, I have repeatedly said at select board meetings that if we really want to do something that would really make a significant difference in our towns, let's make sure that every child has an opportunity for for a preschool experience, and support kids starting their education at a better place, ready to learn in kindergarten. So
Scott,
this is towards that.
Monomoy Family Resource Coordinator?
So, yeah, Lucy Gilmer. So she is located at Harwich Elementary School. So,
okay.
and is the conduit between our schools and the preschools in the area. Action step 3B, explore partnering with community organizations to make use of available classroom spaces in our elementary schools with a focus on expanding preschool experiences specifically for families for whom preschool may not have been otherwise accessible. This may involve providing full-day, full-year options to families. So again, explore the partnerships this year. Ideally, begin a partnership for the upcoming school year and reevaluate the partnerships as we move forward. Page 26, the strategic objective 4, improve curriculum instruction and assessment for all learners. The school district will improve curriculum instruction and assessment for all learners by ensuring that our collective practices are focused on students, preparing them for college, career, and life as members of both the local and global community. The first initiative is to standardize a learner-centered approach within our classroom with, I think the operative word here is standardize. There's still, we've come together as a school district, but there's still aspects of how we operate that we need to work on standardizing between schools and even within schools between classrooms. The first is update the teacher observation template so it defines what's being looked for and supports quality research-based teaching and learning, including elements of universal design for learning, and supports teachers through an instructional coaching model that focuses on growth towards desired outcomes. So in this case, this would be defining what we're looking for when we go into classrooms, and there's a process here that involves collective bargaining. So if you're changing what the evaluation tool and what you're looking for, you need to bargain that with your union. So that's built into the timeline here. Action step 2, foster a learning-focused culture amongst the faculty that's structured around student outcomes. We can measure this by looking at PLC agendas and looking at having the PLC agendas hopefully see more time in those agendas related to student learning and common assessments. 1C, focus curricular work on developing a Monomoy curriculum in all content areas that's lived in the classrooms and centered on the experiences and learning of students. Again, here it's to take the curriculum documents that we have and make sure that we have standardization amongst the curriculum documents across all grade levels in schools, but also to explore using the NEASC accreditation process. We know the high school is going to be going through a NEASC process next year. NEASC has also expanded to do accreditation of districts. So to look at using a district-wide accreditation to validate our progress in creating that experience that's lived in classrooms and centered on the experiences and learning of students.
Could I just ask a question?
Sure.
Here it says curriculum documents. Could you be more specific what that means?
Mark, do you want to talk to what
curriculum documents?
Mark's been
Yes.
going through, what, yeah. the various curriculum documents that the district has.
So I'm planning on doing a separate presentation in January to sort of summarize what I've sort of learned in the time that I've been here. But essentially, one of the things that I've noticed is, like Scott mentioned, when the district came together, a ton of work got done. And having been a part of some of that when I worked here prior, a lot of work had to get done in a very short period of time. And to Scott's point, we need to go back and get things in standardized formats and get them into, so they all sort of look the same, flow the same. And then I'll get into more detail when I present it, but I also have a sort of a technological way that I want to do a workflow through, so it's easier for teachers to access the documents that are all in a similar format, easier to find that point A takes everybody to point B and takes everybody to point C from that. Again, I'll get into more detail when I do that separate presentation, but it's standardizing all of that and getting it in the digital space that's flexible enough for us to review curriculum, but everything still remain in the same process, or in the same format.
The second initiative, to provide authentic, challenging, and experiential learning that prepares students for 2030 and beyond. The action steps here, the first one is to adapt our current curriculum review process to embed civics, digital literacy, personal finance, and wellness concepts ranging from health to parenting in the pre-K through 12 curriculum. This is one of those areas that there was a lot of feedback that we got on, things that people would like to see more of in our curriculum. So, so we go through a curriculum review process. There's a timeline that we have social studies and world languages this year, ELA next year, math and wellness the following year, science and technology and the arts the following year, so that as we go through those, look at what opportunities are there to, to have, more civics in the curriculum, to see more personal finance in the curriculum, to see, more wellness concepts being built into the curriculum. And the last action step is to conduct a comprehensive revision of the pre-K through 12 science and technology engineering curriculum to expand opportunities at the elementary level, to align computer science expectations pre-K through 12, and develop engineering pathways for graduation. Again, here, a lot of the emphasis is going to be focused on really embedding and making sure that we have more science happening in our elementary schools, rather than just, sort of, little exposure to Audubon here and there, but to actually see more science happening. Really look at having more computer technology, the use of computers, early emphasis on coding, and a lot of this is already starting to happen in our elementary schools, but it's to go and see more of that, and to really to sort of up what's happening in our buildings across the sort of STEM spectrum. So that would be the document from one end to the other, and then there's just sort of the last page is, just kind of gets at how we would go about implementing the strategic plan. And, if I kind of link this back to budgets, at the end of the day, implementing this strategic plan is going to require the support of, of the stakeholders within our schools, but it's also going to require the support of, the voters and taxpayers to fund quality schools too.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept this document? Or approve, whatever?
I move to accept the 2018 through 2022 strategic plan as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have
Did I have a question?
I don't know, did you?
No.
I thought you wanted discussion just before you
No,
vote.
no,
It's usually.
I'm fine.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, and I'd really like to thank all of those that were involved in the strategic planning steering committee. It was a lot of hours and that we spent in in a conference room, and trying to write by committee can always be interesting and challenging, but we managed.
And a fine job you did.
Yeah, we luckily had some English experts there to correct grammar along the way.
We're not
Great
finished
job.
with that part of
Great
it either. There'll be more. Come on.
I can't wait.
Okay. Next item is the superintendent's contract.
Take that. Just to report in that the school committee has given authorization for the chair and vice chair to enter into negotiations with the superintendent for the new contract. And that is all.
Okay, then the MSBA grant investment.
Don Mercure, treasurer, was not able to attend tonight's meeting, so he provided me with information regarding the placement of the funds that we received from MSBA. And I'm going to just read so I don't jam anything up, because this is the last step, and he's done such a bang-up job.
Can you trust you with us?
Yeah. And these were in your packets as well. So, at the Monomoy Regional School District School Committee meeting on October 11th, 2018, the school committee awarded the final bond anticipation note, BAN, for the high school building project. BAN 9 for $1.5 million is due for payment on October 19th, 2019. The Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, issued to the district the final grant payment of $1,103,730. Using the grant and the current building project fund balance, the estimated amount needed to pay the BAN 9 is $240,000. Based on the discussions with Chatham and Howard team members, a state note for a period of 3 years will be used to finance BAN 9 balance, beginning with the FY20 budget. Approximately $1.2 million can now be invested in CDs or money market accounts until the funds are needed to be applied to pay BAN 9. Dawn sent an email to several investment firms and banks requesting interest rate information. The objective of investing these funds is to reduce the funds needed to be budgeted to pay BAN 9. He provided in the packet the rates from the different lending institutions on what they would, the interest rates and earnings for CDs and money markets. Liquidity is not an issue, and the money market interest is not higher than a CD. The funds should be invested in a CD. Even though the funds are needed in less than a year, they can be redeemed early without a penalty or loss of interest. My recommendation to the school committee, Don Mercure's recommendation, our treasurer, to the school committee, is to invest in a 12-month CD through the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod at the proposed interest rate of 2.7%. So a motion would be needed to approve the investment through Cape Cod, through the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod to invest the 12-month CD. So that's the motion that would be required tonight.
And could I have that motion or second? Yes, Jackie?
I think I can. I move to approve that the school committee is to invest in a 12-month CD through the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod at the proposal interest rate of 2.7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And Dawn thanks you.
Thank you.
You did a nice job.
Where? Okay. Subcommittee reports, superintendent evaluation, subcommittee report?
Yes. Just a brief update that the subcommittee recently met and reviewed the superintendent's goals, and just that there will be more to come at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're just down, superintendent's report.
Although, I don't think he needs to.
Sorry. I think he's done.
I'll be short. Just two quick things, yeah. Donna, what happened? I think once upon a time, we were out of here by 8:30.
I know, I've been saving it for
You're losing your magic as chair. So we have, we have a meeting coming up Monday, January 7th with the Harwich Select Board. As I mentioned at our last school committee meeting, we have a vacancy for a position for a Harwich School Committee member. The selectmen posted in December 13th in the Cape Cod Chronicle a notice of vacancy. People have up to January 2nd to submit letters of interest to the town if they're interested in being on the school committee. At present, there have been 4 individuals who have submitted a letter of interest: Dana DaCosta, Linda Sabula, Tina Gaines, and Charles Griska. So I will extend an invitation to those 4 to individually meet with me when we come back from the holiday break and answer any questions they have, and then they will go before the Harwich Selectmen along with the Harwich members of our school committee to have that joint group ask them questions and make a determination who to select. So, but again, thank you to those that that threw their hat in the ring. You never know, if you throw your hat in the ring, you end up on the school committee anyway. Right, Joe and Joanne? Okay, so you never know.
Never know, never knows.
So I also want to just mention one thing. We had, I believe it was yesterday, Joy Jordan held our first mentor training. I think we had 5 mentors that were trained to start working with students as in our Lighthouse Leader program. And I think she has another training coming up tomorrow with a few more individuals from the community that want to get involved in mentoring. So this is our sort of pilot on that area, and another thing that our community engagement coordinators bring to the district. So thank you.
Thank you. Being quick. No. Okay. Surplus items from Harwich Elementary. Where are they here? Okay.
I'll read them.
Jackie was thrilled to read them.
I move to approve the following surplus materials estimated at a value under $5,000. Current location, Harwich Elementary School Playground. 1 spiral stainless steel slide, broken, health hazard. 1 preschool jungle gym, rusted, health hazard. 1 fireman's pole, health hazard. So sad. Harwich Elementary School, 1 Sharp cassette recorder, 1 Ekai CD cassette, and also from the Harwich Elementary School, 2 laminators. That is it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Good night, all.